One of my dad's favorite weekend pursuits was a drive in the country to some unknown destination, always an adventure. We would pile into the station wagon and off we would go. One of his favorite haunts was Amish country. And we would drive the back roads for hours looking for horses and buggies and those people with funny hats. We would look for clues as to where they might be gathering. I never understood why. Dad never explained it, but he seemed to be quite obsessed with it. And some days we would see maybe one or two, and other times we'd see whole gatherings. He'd get all excited. Didn't mean a whole lot to me. They were kind of curious people, but no big deal. What was a big deal is that somewhere along the way, usually toward the end of the journey, we would end up at the Amish dairy. Now, one might think that, given the fact that you had two boys in the back seat, that stopping at the Amish dairy would mean ice cream. In all of our stops, hope against hope never happened. Dad would emerge after a few moments in the dairy with a white package. He would announce that they were out of ice cream, but he'd gotten some cheese. And he would carefully lay it in his lap and begin to unwrap the white butcher paper. And then the smell. Oh. It was the sharpest cheddar I have ever had in my life. Awesome. He would carefully reach into his pocket and pull out his pocket knife. And then, almost ceremoniously, he would unfold the blade and pause. And in that moment of silence, we all knew what was coming. You're not going to use that thing on that cheese. It's dirty. You have no idea where it has been. Well, it's been in my pocket. But what have you used it for? What kind of thing has it touched? It's filthy. It's dirty. To which my dad would reply by holding the blade to his lips, spitting on it, and then wiping it on his pants, and proceeding to hack off a hunk of cheese for my brother and I. To my recollection, neither of us died. In fact, I'm not sure either of us ever got sick from eating that cheese or anything else my dad cut with his knife. But it didn't stop my mother's obsession with clean and unclean. In fact, I think my mother could make anything in the world dirty if she put her mind to it. There were dirty places, like public restaurants. You didn't go into them. They were dirty. There were certain restaurants that were dirty. There were rooms of the house that were dirty, kitchen, bathroom, and especially our room. We were reminded very often that it was dirty. It was a pigsty. There were dirty parts of your body, parts you didn't show other people, parts you didn't talk about. And then there was the dirtiest of all, the fingernails. I can still feel the pain of that fingernail file under the fingernails. Talk about torture. There were dirty behaviors. There were dirty things. Dirty books, dirty movies, dirty TV shows, things you didn't watch or read. But most especially, there were dirty people. And we did not associate with dirty people under any circumstances. She was very clear about that. I used to think her obsession with cleanliness was because she was a nurse. I discovered later in life from a black sheep cousin of mine that our great-grandmother was actually Jewish. Boy, did that explain so much of my mother's behavior and attitudes. A world of clean and unclean. A world of the law, Torah, black and white. That was the world in which early Christianity was born. In fact, the early Christians were all Jews. They worshiped in the synagogue, they kept the law, they practiced kosher. And then Christianity began to bump into the rest of the world, the non-Jewish world, the Gentiles. And the word that they proclaimed about Jesus the Christ found a home among these new people, these non-Jews. And then came the divisive question. Does one need to become Jewish before one can become Christian? Does one need to be circumcised before one can be baptized? Does one need to practice kosher law? Or can one eat freely? Burning questions for the early church. And it divided the church. There were James and the Jerusalem gang that believed, yes, you had to be circumcised, you had to be Jewish, you had to keep the law if you were going to be a good Christian. And then those radical folks like Peter and Paul who were pushing the Gentile mission like crazy, who saw baptism as the entry into the faith. And they were under fire. Many wondered what they were doing, eating with the uncircumcised. Didn't they know they were dirty people, unclean? And Peter explains, when challenged, that he had a vision. One day, a sheet came out of the heavens filled with unclean animals, animals declared unclean by Torah law, kosher law. And he was told to eat. He said, none of these things have ever passed my lips. No, I will not. 3 times the sheet is let down, and he's told to eat. 3 times he refuses. And then comes the word. What God has made clean, let no one else make profane. It was one of those aha moments for Peter. I get it. And it begins to define the early church's understanding of baptism. It is through the waters that wash us clean that God makes us clean and welcomes us into the kingdom, into the faith. Christianity replaces circumcision as the entry rite. And Torah law is replaced by the great commandment to love God and neighbor. Suddenly, Christianity takes on a new hue, a new understanding. All of God's people are welcomed into the faith, regardless of their backgrounds, whether they come from the synagogue or from the temple. God welcomes them and makes them clean. just as he makes us clean in the waters of our baptism. And not only in that act at some point in our lives, but he continues to wash us clean every day, offering us a new opportunity to live fully into a new relationship with him and with one another, to look at the world around us as God sees it, and to live into that understanding. That's a word that doesn't sell these days, because we have become a people like my mother who are pretty obsessed with dividing into clean and unclean. Of course, the clean always look like us, and the unclean always look and behave like those people. You know, those people. They're the ones that are different than us, given their political ideologies, given how they've responded to COVID. They are those people that read those books. They are people who have been educated. Never did I think that a college education would be a liability in my work, and yet it has become a tremendous impediment these days. We divide over the color of skin. Just yesterday, 10 people were shot in Buffalo, my birthplace. The reason? They were black. How far we have come. How low we have stooped. We divide by not only color, but ethnic origin, by history, by economic background, by sexual preference, by gender. We divide over issues and ideologies. We have made this world clean and unclean, nice and neat. Interesting. Because as I read scripture, and if I'm remembering right, in that opening chapter of Genesis, when God is finished with creating all of us, humanity, he announces, it's very good. It's very good. All of it. So if that's the starting point, if God has made us clean, who are we to make it profane? Who are we to judge it dirty?